Hello, BookTube. I must say you're looking rather good. Have you been hitting the gym? Maybe home gym, body weights only? How about the keto diet? You look slimmer and your hair looks... All right, fine. I went back to the Brattle. All right? Just stop nagging me. I went back to the Brattle bookshop here in Boston. Third day in a row. Okay? My excuse, if I need one, is that I have been locked in this house since mid-March. The Brattle has been closed to my commerce all that time. This is the longest time that I've gone without going to the Brattle when I have been in the Boston area. So when I was in Iowa, when I was in Texas, when I was in Southern California, I wasn't going to the Brattle every day. And when I was out of the country, I wasn't going to the Brattle every day. But when I have been in Boston, this is the longest I've ever gone without going to the Brattle. So when they reopened their sale lot, I went back. Okay. And it is the sale lot that we're talking about here because, as I mentioned ad nauseum here, the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston is a great used bookstore. 3 stories, full of books, and with a turnover rate that it makes it a different experience almost literally every day. But there's also a sale lot next door to the store itself that has not just the usual 1 or 2 carts of books outside like used bookstores do, but thousands of them on the walls and on carts. Just the whole lot is full of used books. And they're incredible. Now, ordinarily the sale lot is $1, $3, and $5. Right now it's $5 for everything. Everything's $5. And it's only a bitterly hardened denizen of the Brattle dollar carts like myself who would even think to say that that's expensive. $5 for a book is not expensive. So I went on Monday, the first day that the sale lot was open, and I was so excited that I was just bouncing from one place to another. I was seeing people, talking to people I haven't seen in months. And then I went back yesterday for a more concerted look. I tried to look at every single book. And I went back today. Again, it's still beautiful weather. I wasn't gone for long, so I wasn't traumatizing the little bean. And today, my mission was to sort of play cleanup. Get the stuff that I have maybe seen on the previous 2 days but hadn't gotten. Pretty much, my goal for today was pretty much to walk out of the sale lot with everything that I wanted, not to leave anything behind that's sort of nagging at me, because the rest of the week is fairly heavy with deadline work. I don't think I'm going to be able to go to the Brattle tomorrow, even if I wanted to. I will want to, but I don't think I'd be able to go to the Brattle tomorrow, and I don't think I'll be able to go for the rest of this week, because some of these deadlines are fairly unyielding. The most unyielding and the biggest one of all being one that isn't actually my deadline at all. It's a deadline I'm taking on for someone else because they can't do it. But these are the things you do when you are the fastest gun east of the Pecos. So I don't think I'm going to be able to go back. So I went today and got a bunch of books, a pile of books, on that assumption that I probably won't be back to the Brattle until, I don't know, next week sometime. I found some wonderful stuff here, and I want to show them all to you. The first one is an art book. It's an oversized art book. I'm leery about getting these things because I don't tend to keep them, and they tend to take up a cruel amount of space. They're awkward. I have only so many tall bookshelves, and they need a tall bookshelf. But this one I couldn't pass up. This is a book that was made in conjunction with an event, with an exhibit, an art exhibit. This is Gondola Days. And the subtitle is Isabella Stewart Gardner and the Palazzo Barbaro's Circle. And that is John Singer Sargent wash on the front. And there is Isabella Stewart Gardner on the back in Venice. And this is in the early 2000s, 2004, I think, the Gardner Museum here in Boston put on an exhibit called Gondola Days, which was all about the Palazzo Barbaro's Circle. In 1885, Daniel Curtis, who was he was a banker. He is just about as old a Boston Brahmas family as you can get, and he was a banker. He was a trustee at the Boston Public Library. He was, what is that piece of light on my head? There we go. He was a president of a Boston bank. He was just a classic dyed-in-the-wool Boston Brahmin, and he and his wife Ariana had fallen in love with the Palazzo Barbaro on the Grand Canal in Venice years before, when parts of it, large parts of it, were still owned by descendants of the Barbaro family. But the thing was, like everything else in 19th century Venice, the thing was falling apart, and the Curtises didn't lack for money. so eventually, by 1885, they bought the place, and they renovated it completely, lovingly. One of the things that comes up in accounts of that time, in letters, in reflections from the Barbaros Circle, all is the word love. Over and over again, lovingly comes up. And you could tell they cleaned, they restored with a great deal of respect for the house's storied history. And then they opened their doors to all kinds of artistic folk, hence the Palazzo Barbaros Circle. Isabella Stewart Gardner went there many, many times. She loved visiting and rented the place when the Curtises were away. When they were traveling, she rented the Palazzo Barbaro. And wherever she went and wherever they went, artists gathered as well, and writers. Henry James conceived of Wings of the Dove and the Aspern Papers, mainly through the atmosphere that he imbibed in the Palazzo Barbaro. And artists flocked to the place in great numbers. The artist Anders Zorn is fantastic, an absolutely great artist who's not known outside of art circles today, but his artwork, his Venice artwork is amazing. His artwork just in general is amazing. He did a self-portrait that is terrifying. but Zorn wasn't the only one. John Singer Sargent, an even greater painter, in my opinion, the greatest painter of the 19th century, was a frequent guest at the Palazzo Barbaro and did a huge amount of painting. And the Curtis's son, Ralph Curtis, who in the 1870s and in the early 1880s was quite a kumquat. He was quite the dish. He also became an artist, and an extremely talented one. His mother was forever telling art world snobs, he's not just a dilettante. And he's not just in this because we give money to the art museum and give paintings to the art museum and whatnot, and have the world's greatest artists coming in and out of our door. He's not just a trumped up pretender here. He actually has talent. I think that largely fell on deaf ears. I have no idea what the collectability is of a Ralph Curtis painting now, but he did have a lot of talent, and all of that is captured in this book. All of it is. There's tons and tons of... Actually, I wonder, now that I think about it, this probably has a painting of Ralph when he was a kid. It probably does. Let's see if we can find him. Anyway, it wasn't just artists, of course, intellectuals, writers of all kinds. Robert Browning, Charles Eliot Norton of Harvard University. They all came to the Palazzo Barbaro once this new atmosphere was in place, and they loved it. They loved it. And part of that was that the Palazzo Barbaro was such a wonderful location right there on the Grand Canal okay. That's Daniel Curtis, and that is Ariana. Part of it was that, but also part of it was the Curtises, who were wonderful. They were the soul of vivacity, and really knew how to. There's Ralph's wife, who John Singer Sargent did. There we go. Okay, this is Ralph Curtis in 1878. Don't know how much you'll be able to make out there, but this thing is full of the paintings, the photographs of the time, sketches, the comic sketches that were done. But the main reason that I got this, the main reason that I grabbed it, ordinarily my stricture against big art books would rule out exhibition companion volumes right away because they're usually pretty thin. This one isn't. Oh my God. It is so incredibly over-historical. You could easily have done the opposite of this and had this be a book with color paintings, a normal-sized book with color paintings instead of an oversized art book. People are looking at this completely wrong if they think that this is text accompanying an exhibit. The exhibit was great fun. The Gardner exhibits tend to be memorable, truly memorable, in a way that, in a more intimate and a more lasting, in the memory way than exhibits at the Museum of Fine Arts, which is right across the street from the Gardner Museum. Although the Museum of Fine Arts every once in a while will hit one out of the park. They had an exhibit of John Singer Sargent paintings, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that became a mega hit. in this. It became an event. It became a thing to do in the city. It was so well thought of, so well talked about, so much so that the museum opened its admission hours to 24 hours, to around the clock. And if you were going to come, you could make an appointment to come at 3 a.m. and wander around and look at the Sargent paintings in the exhibit. But this is so loaded with Boston and Venetian history, so loaded with it, that I count it as a volume of history, not so much as an art volume. So I grabbed it. I was happy to grab it. But I grabbed a lot of other things too. Let's start with a theme. Shall we? Let's start with a theme. And the theme is in this room. If I thought I was going to have problems before with the bookcase that I have for book reviews and book essays, that sort of thing, I got a few volumes in the last couple of days at the Brattle that were along those lines. I have a bookcase that's just for that, and I'm going to have to redo it. But now I'm going to have to do more than redo it. I'm going to have to take books out of this room because I found 4 more volumes that are going to go on in this room on that shelf. One is one that I've had on that shelf before in trade paperback. I found a hardcover, and it's just in time because I don't have the trade paperback anymore. This is The Afterlife by Penelope Fitzgerald, which is her collected essays, her collected book writings, and they're amazingly good. She's amazingly good at this sort of thing. Even better, dare I say, than she is at her novels. Then this next one is not technically that, although it comes close. It's not technically book essays, but it comes awful close. And I've had this volume a few times and given it away every time. Hi, Bean. How you doing? Oh, you want to say hi? Come over here to see these people. Huh? Look at that face. Oh, look at that pretty face of yours. Oh, you just come over to say hi? I'm talking to the camera. I should be talking to you. That's the problem here, is that I'm talking to you instead of her. Because we spend all day, every day together, except for these last 3 days. Oh my God, where there's been hell to pay when I came back because I was gone for 2 hours. But this next book I have had many times. I've given it away many times. And every single recipient has had the same profession. I bet you can guess what it is when you see the book. This is edited by Susan Allen Toth and John Coughlin. And it is called Reading Rooms. America's foremost writers celebrate our public libraries with stories, memoirs, essays, and poems. This is a wonderful, wonderful book. If you love a library, you have to have this book. And it's not just memoirs. It's not just nonfiction. There are short stories set in libraries, murder mysteries in libraries, stories where books talk to each other in libraries, that sort of thing. This is a wonderful one-stop book for the wonder of public libraries. And I, of course, there's a public library here in Boston, the Boston Public Library. I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. Don't use it as much as I used to, especially now. But I had started to use it when the pandemic shut all that down. I'm looking forward to those days coming back. That would be great. In the heat of the summer, maybe, if the pandemic disappears completely, I would love it if I get a little glimpse of that again. Not just the Boston Public Library, the regular book sale that goes on there, but also just the library itself. I also belong to a private library here in Boston, but that's not what this book is about. This book is about public libraries, and it is the ultimate love song to public libraries. So I couldn't leave it, and I don't plan on getting rid of this one, so I've got to find room for it in this room. Same thing with this next one. This next one is literary essays, literary and cultural essays, movie reviews, that sort of thing, from a great writer, a great critic, Daniel Mandelson. This is how beautiful it is and how easily it can be broken. A big volume that I don't think I've ever owned, that has movie reviews, this is all New Yorker type stuff that he does, New Yorker and New York Review of Book type stuff that he does. He's fantastic, so I really want this, and I've often thought about it. You see it referenced, he mentions it, and I don't think I've ever owned a copy, so it's got to go in this room. And this next one is also going to go in this room. I think this is the second time that I have hauled this. I think I got a copy of this once before and showed it to you, maybe not. But this is another thing. This is another volume just like that. This is collected criticism. But here we mean newspaper pieces, mostly for Harper's, by William J. Smith. This is The Streaks of the Tulip. Not my favorite kind of cover. This is our author. That was a picture taken right before he became a Democratic politician in Vermont. But he wrote these pieces over the course of years. He was a really, really good poetry analyst, poetry critic. And there's going to be a lot of that in here. But he does, it was, I think, also a fairly well-regarded poet in his day. But he does also all sorts of other stuff, too. He writes about all kinds of books in this book. As soon as I saw it, I knew that I wanted it. And look at that. Look at what we're talking about. That's half of a bookshelf that's going to go in this room. And it's not just going to go anywhere in this room. It's going to go on that bookcase. So I have to pull apart that bookcase, especially now that I'm not going back to the Brattle, for a few days. I need to pull apart that bookcase. Once I've glommed over these books, I'm leaving them all separate so I can glom over them and study them and whatnot. But once I have done that, they have to go in here, and I need to pull books out of there to do that. I don't know how that's going to work. But those were 4 bookish book essay type things. 4 books basically from my own profession. And then we'll move on. I've got a couple of works of history that I want to show you here. One is one from, I think, 2011. 2014. I read this when it first came out and loved it. I had a copy. I would have hauled it before I knew what a haul was, and we wouldn't have seen it, but it's really, really good. It's by Malcolm Gaskell, and it's called Between Two Worlds. It's how the English became American. And there was one book review, a history book review venue, that pointed out very accurately that this author does not seem to care about intellectual history or critical theory history. He's mainly interested in people. And he's not writing this book with a foreknowledge of the American Revolution at all. He's writing just in the day, focused down in the moment, about how these colonists from all up and down the whole of the English colonial world, all the way to Barbados, made the decision to take a chance on emigrating, and then what they did, how they adapted, how they gradually became a different people than the one they set out as. I loved it. Just loved it. I also love the way it's written. Just fantastic. It's an example of a new work of history that I have received in this 20 years that I have been back in being a book critic that I really loved but didn't keep. So I'm glad that I found it, because this is going to go right on the history wall. This next one is also a work of history. I got an advance copy of this when it came out. When was that? 2010. I got an advance copy of this in 2010, and I read it. I got the finished copy, and I read it. I liked both of them. This is a historian that I really like, but I didn't keep it, and I don't quite know why. And this is a subject that we hit upon yesterday in a tag. This is The Last Stand by Nathaniel Philbrick, the author of The Heart of the Sea. This is the story of Custer and Little Bighorn. The subtitle is Custer, Sitting Bull, and the Battle of Little Bighorn, which I mentioned briefly yesterday is a subject of perennial fascination for me, where an entire U.S. detachment was just completely wiped out by the Sioux. And we have many Sioux accounts of what happened. The Sioux accounts differ in a lot of key places where you wish they wouldn't, where especially in how Custer died and when and where he died. Did he die in the Little Bighorn River? Did he die early on in The Last Stand? Who killed him? Did he kill himself? Et cetera, et cetera. The accounts from the Sioux vary on a lot of those points that you wish they didn't. The accounts from the Sioux are unanimous in how long it took. We think of it as this long, huge siege that went on for a whole of an afternoon, but the Sioux accounts are all unanimous, that it took, as one Sioux commentator put it, the length of time it takes to eat a quick lunch. And that was from the very beginning to the very end. That's not long at all. That's not long at all. Some Sioux, there's been speculation as to why the Sioux did not despoil Custer's body. He's found with 2 bullet wounds, one in the head and one in the torso. And there's been speculation that, of course, the headshot was him killing himself to avoid capture and torture. Except that it's on the wrong side. It's not the side that Custer was handed, and it's not the side where you would think that he would hold up a gun. And so, which led to further speculation that maybe someone did it for him at his request. Plenty of soldiers were doing that. They were killing themselves as their fate became obvious, or they were asking friends to kill them. Because the number one goal was to avoid the torture that would happen. They would be scalped. They would have their eyelids cut off. They would have their private parts cut off. They would have their tongues cut out. All while still alive, all while being humiliated, and sometimes left that way for days. And no one wanted that, of course. So at the end, when the concentric rings of Sioux warriors were getting closer and closer to this little readout of people who were still alive, suicide was common, and that would be an explanation if it's true, because the Sioux typically did not despoil or take trophies from the bodies of people who killed themselves. They were considered unclean. This is considered a cowardly thing. We don't know. We have no idea. Philbrick does a great job. I don't know why I didn't keep this book. So I was glad to find it. I was glad to find it for $5. That's fantastic. And that was the history portion of our program here. Next one is a collection volume that I loved. I've loved it many times. I give it away as often as I get it. I'm hoping I hold on to it this time. This is by Viking Penguin. This is a book of travelers' tales, edited by Eric Newby. Who is a great travel writing author who did, among many other books, he did A Short Walk in the Hindu Kush, which is fantastic. It's a classic of travel writing. But he did a bunch of others that were also really, really good. And I saw this and realized I didn't have it and grabbed it. And when I was briefly looking at it on the way back, I noticed it's got tons of junk in it. And I love book readers that put tons of junk in their books. That just, for some reason, that always just pleases me to no end. What have we got here? Okay, an old paperback Booksmith bookmark where someone just did sums on the back, because this was always just, these were always just so handy. They were blank on one side. Paperback Booksmith I don't think exists anymore as a bookstore chain, but they used to get these bookmarks. You hand them out like candy. They were everywhere. They were great advertising. What else have we got here? What's this next thing? This next thing is a receipt, an old crinkly receipt. This is the receipt is in the excerpt from Xenophon, from the Retreat of the 10,000. Okay, we also have a $20 bill. I'll definitely hold on to that. That's for sure. Oh wow! All right. Well, great. Anyway, the person who had this, whenever, was much along the same lines as myself, a careless user of bookmarks. I don't know how much money is being used as bookmarks right in this room. It's such a perfect shape, right? It's such a perfect shape. There, look. I'll show you. See? It's the exact same shape as the paperback Booksmith bookmark. So it's understandable. But I'm going to use the paperback Booksmith bookmark in here, not the $20 bill. I can think of better uses for the $20 bill than that. So I got this because there you've got an old travel chest. I have one of those. It doesn't have that many stickers on it, but I have one that looks exactly like that. I used it to travel. It was battered all to hell and gone, but it's still here. And it was at the bottom of a case like that I put the books that I traveled with. And I love these sorts of things because my days of traveling are over. So the only way I'm ever going to experience it now is armchair travel from stuff like this. Then we have something I mentioned the other day. I was at the Brattle and I saw Foucault's Pendulum by Umberto Eco, and I immediately thought of Jason Harrigan at Byways in Bookland, because one of the things that BookTube does is wonderful, and one of those things is that suddenly you are walking around with other readers in your head and thinking about them when you see a smorgasbord like the Brattle sale lot. So I saw Foucault's Pendulum and immediately thought of Jason. I thought, I don't have a copy, but I'm not 100% sure that if Jason's videos weren't in my life, I would have grabbed it. I'm not 100% sure of that, but I did, because his videos are in my life, because we know these other book people, and they've talked about things, and those things stick in your mind. And I'm sure that happens to you as well. And that happened again today. It wasn't Jason, it was Mark Richardson at Richardson Reads. Because I came across a hardcover with a dust jacket in fine condition. I'll fix it up a little. Of a book that's virtually synonymous with Mark. I mean, there are a couple of things that are. And this is Kenneth Roberts, the great Kenneth Roberts. This is his novel Rabble in Arms, with a fantastic cover there. That is just great. This has a little divot taken out of the top there. That'll be easy to fix. And as soon as I saw it, I realized that I don't have a copy. And Rabble in Arms is my favorite Kenneth Roberts book. But I'm not, even though it is my favorite, and even though I don't have a copy, I'm not sure I would have been as quick to grab this if I hadn't had so many wonderful hours talking about Kenneth Roberts and all things New England with Mr. New England, Mark Richardson. So that's another example of how I was alone in the sale lot, but I had a bunch of booktubers with me. So that was a lot of fun. And the last thing we'll look at here is also a trend. It's also a booktube. That shelf that's right up there is Everyman Classic hardcover editions, which a lot of you had been sending me during quarantine, which is so nice of you. It's so much fun to receive those. And that made me extra conscious of when I see them now in a bookstore. And I saw one today, one that I definitely want, to keep. It is a keeper. It is coming into this room. It's Charles Darwin. And it's the two Darwin books that I go to more often than any others. The Origin of Species and The Voyage of the Beagle in one volume. So that is going in this room up on that shelf. And it's in perfect condition. And yesterday I had Muriel Spark, also in fine condition. So Muriel Spark's not coming in this room, but this book is. Because the only other edition, I have the Penguin Classic Origin of Species, and I have the annotated Origin. And neither one of them is hardcover, and sometimes you just want that. I will definitely take this, absolutely. So there you go. That was my third consecutive day of going to the Brattle. I'm not going tomorrow. So I don't know what we'll do tomorrow to entertain ourselves, but this was a huge amount of fun. So we have the Everyman's Classic hardcover of Darwin's two great books. We have Rabble in Arms by Kenneth Roberts with a co-writing credit by Mark Richardson. We have a Book of Traveler's Tales, edited by the great Eric Newby. We have The Last Stand by Nathaniel Philbrick, a historian I really like. We have Between Two Worlds by Malcolm Gaskell. This is a work of history that I really liked. I'm trying to remember if it made the list of best history for that year. I wouldn't be surprised if it did. Then we have a bunch of essay collections. We have The Streaks of the Tulip from the pages of Harper's. We have How Beautiful It Is and How Easily It Can Be Broken by Daniel Mandelson. We have Reading Rooms, Love Poems to Public Libraries. We have The Afterlife by Penelope Fitzgerald, her critical essays. And then last, a little too big to go on the top there, is Gondola Days. In many ways, the find of the day. This is the one that I'll be reading the fastest, because rereading the fastest, because I knew that this copy was out there. I saw it in the gift shop at the Gardner when that exhibit was up. But I figured, I know a lot of this history. I know a lot of these people. The minor footnotes that are all through this book, I know a lot of them. I know a lot of what they did and when they did it, because it's Boston history, all of it. It's saturated with Boston history. And what if it isn't Boston history is Venetian history, which I also know fairly well. So at the time, the book was pricey, and I wasn't buying retail books like that at all. And I thought, I'm soaking up the exhibit. I went to the exhibit probably 10 times. I thought that's probably good enough. Very happy to find the book, and for a song. So that is great. So that is our trip to the Brattle for today. There won't be a Brattle trip tomorrow, so don't get your hopes up. This time I mean it. But who knows what else we'll talk about? I'm gonna have a great deal of fun glomming over these things. But I will wrap this up for now. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.